Today I'm going to convert the push-fit single-posed Von Ryan Leapers into a more dynamic pose, and it's coming right up. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video, the last video in a mini-series of me converting the Tyranids from the Leviathan box set. Now, for reference, I'm not converting the Termagants, the Neuro Gaunts, the Barb Gaunts, or the Ripper Swarms. I'm just going to leave them as they are. It's the bigger things which I'm converting, the ones which are going to look a little bit odd when side by side, because I've got two sets of these Tyranids. And today we're converting the 3 Von Ryan Leapers. Now, of course, the first thing that we have to do is cut them off of their sprue and clean up the mould lines. However, when I do this, I do consult the instruction book. I do use the numbers from the instruction book, and what I do is cut them off as if they were individual models. So I ended up with 3 piles of bits, and then it was time to start building. Now, the first thing to do is to put the body section on. That's not going to interfere with our conversion, and then we're going to have a look at the legs. So what I did first is I got one leg from a miniature and had a look to see if it would fit on some of the other miniatures, because of course these are single fit posed miniatures, and I found that 1 or 2 legs were interchangeable and some weren't, so I just worked out which legs were going to go where. Now, I thought the middle miniature here would be the ideal one for me to use up a piece which I cut off one of the other miniatures, the Neuro Tyrants, this piece of terrain. So I thought I could have him standing on this piece of terrain, maybe leaping off of it. I then got to work on the legs. What I had to do was cut the little nodule off some of the legs so that they actually fit into place. I basically just dry fitted all of the legs until I was happy how they were going to be. Now, of course, some of the legs had terrain on the base which I would no longer need, so I had to cut some of the terrain off. I also had to cut some of the little nodules which are supposed to be joined to the base, where basically I just didn't need those nodules anymore. So I just prepared the legs ready for gluing. Now, when I was gluing these miniatures, I made sure that the legs were obviously neat, there was no gaps, and then also that the new pose wouldn't look odd where the legs were. Now, once the legs were in position, I had another look at the piece of terrain, the pipe where I was going to stand this lictor on, and worked out exactly where he was going to go. My initial thought was on the top of the pipe, but when the legs were actually glued into position, it didn't quite look right. However, I continued with the idea. Now, the terrain piece is actually way too big for the base, so I'm going to have to clip some down. So I'm going to clip some down at the front and back, and then I'm going to work out how I'm going to put these legs on. However, before I did that, I stuck on the other half of the jaw, which is just a piece I probably should have stuck on at the beginning, but I didn't realise. So I just stuck the jaw section into position. Okay, so back to the pipe, and I'd worked out how I was going to have this miniature posed. I'm going to make use of the hole which is there for the Neuro Tyrant to actually push into, and I'm going to use that as a foothold for his foot. First though, I needed to cut down the terrain, so I just got my clippers and I trimmed off the edges. Now, after it was cut off, there was a little hole which I thought I could just fill with green stuff. However, in the end, I just used some more basing material to fill the hole. Okay, so the terrain is glued on, and I hid the 2 holes that were there so that I didn't have to fill them with green stuff later. And as I said, I'm going to fill those little gaps with some terrain. And then I worked on his foothold. I actually cut some out to make it flatter, make the foot actually fit into that hole a little bit better, just so that it was easier to glue. And then I glued all 3 models to the bases. Now, I actually used some rocks on these converted versions. I used rocks on my Tyranid army, so it's going to match in quite well. And I used the rocks to help place their feet into positions, just to give them that different pose. And I was really happy how they were looking so far. Now, there is another hole on the pipe of this guy, so what I did is I just cut it around a little bit just to make it look like a bullet hole or some damage. That was easy enough to do. And then I was ready for the next stage. Now, both sets of arms seem to be fairly interchangeable and also movable in the holes. So what I did is I dry fitted the arms, swapping them around a bit like I did on the legs, just to work out which arms I thought would go better with which poses. Now there were some arms that just didn't fit very well in the incorrect body. So again, I just dry fitted them all until I had the right arms where I wanted them. I then glued both sets of arms into position. I started with the small claws, then I went on to the big claws, just making sure that the claws poses matched the bodies. And that's it. They are all done. I'm really happy how they look. They definitely look different from the originals, and that means now I have a whole unit of 6 and they all have different poses, and that's the idea of these conversions. Let me know what you think in the comments box below. If you want to see all of the other conversions I've done in this little mini series, then there's the playlist for you to watch, and here are a couple of playlists featuring Necron conversions which you may also enjoy.